Meet student A. They study for just 33 minutes a day, they get 8 hours of sleep, they have a social life, and somehow they consistently score in the top 5% of their class. Most of their study time is spent doing practice questions, testing themselves, and explaining difficult concepts to other people. Now meet student B. They study for 4 hours every single day, they sacrifice sleep, they barely see their friends, and yet they struggle to maintain an average B. Their notebooks are packed with notes, their textbooks are covered in highlighter, and they spend hours reading the same chapters. So, what's the difference? It's not intelligence, not dedication, and certainly not luck. It's how they study, not how long they study. But before we get into that, I want you to do something. Think about your current study method and rate it from 1 to 10. 1 means my study method is terrible, and 10 means I have completely figured this out. Got your number? Good. Because by the end of this video, we are going to see if you still agree with that rating, and I'll also show you the exact study method that helped me go from getting B's and C's to straight A's. The night that changed everything. I still remember one night during my junior year, it was around 3 a.m. I was sitting in my dorm room, empty coffee cups everywhere, notebooks covering my desk, and I'd been studying for almost 12 hours for a psychology exam the next morning, and I thought I was doing everything right. I was highlighting important points, rereading chapters, writing detailed notes. My notes actually looked amazing, but deep down, something felt wrong. Because even after 12 hours, I couldn't remember half of what I'd studied. The information was slipping through my mind like sand through my fingers. And that night changed the way I studied forever. Not because I aced the exam, quite the opposite. I did terribly, and it forced me to admit something I didn't want to hear. I didn't actually know how to study. I only knew how to spend time studying, and those are two very different things. The productivity illusion. Think about how we normally study. We read the same chapter again and again, hoping that eventually it will stick. We highlight so much of the textbook that the entire page is basically fluorescent. We write pages and pages of notes and then never look at them again. It's a bit like saving hundreds of useful videos on Instagram and never actually watching them. We mistake activity for progress, and that's the productivity illusion. You feel productive because you're doing something. You're reading, you're highlighting, you're writing, you're sitting at your desk for hours, but none of that guarantees that you're actually learning. You're caught in this trap when you spend more time choosing the perfect highlighter color than understanding the topic, or when you spend 20 minutes creating the perfect study playlist only to realize you have barely studied. The problem isn't that you're lazy. The problem is that you have been taught to measure studying by time. 3 hours of studying sounds impressive, 5 hours sound even better, but your brain doesn't care how long you sat at your desk. It cares about one thing: how much you can actually remember and use later. So, this brings us to something I call the consumption trap. It's the belief that the more information you consume, the more you will learn. More pages, more videos, more notes, more hours. But your brain isn't a sponge that automatically absorbs everything you throw at it. Learning requires something more. You have to retrieve the information. You have to struggle to remember it, use it, explain it, apply it. This is where real learning starts. Think about it this way. Imagine two students. Student A studies for 5 hours but only remembers 10% of what they studied. Student B studies for 1 hour but remembers 50%. Student A spent 5 times longer studying, but both students end up with roughly the same amount of useful information. So the question shouldn't be, how many hours did I study? The better question is, how much did I actually learn? This is a high time to introduce you the concept of active learning, because active learning is something that changed my life. I stopped trying to consume information and started trying to retrieve it. Instead of rereading a chapter 5 times, I'd close the book and try to explain what I just learned. Instead of simply looking at the flashcards, I'd force myself to answer before checking the answer. Instead of highlighting every important sentence, I'd ask myself questions. And instead of studying until midnight, I'd focus intensely for shorter periods, then give my brain time to recover. This is something called active learning. And it's far more useful than simply staring at information. Think of passive studying like pouring water into a bucket with holes in it. You can keep pouring and pouring and pouring, but most of it disappears. Active learning is about patching the holes. You're not just putting more information in, you're making sure the information actually actually stays. And when I changed my approach, my study sessions become shorter but much more effective. So, how can you actually do this? Here is the simple system. Step 1. Study in a shorter sessions. Instead of forcing yourselves to study for 4 hours straight, try working in a focused blocks of around 30 to 60 minutes. Then take a proper break. The goal isn't to sit at your desk for as long as possible. The goal is to make the entire time you spend there actually count. Step 2. Test yourself first. Before you open your textbook, ask yourself, what do I already know about this? Write down everything you can remember. Don't worry if you get things wrong. That's actually useful because now you know what you need to work on. Step 3. Find your weak spots. Don't spend another hour reviewing something you already understand. Find the areas where you're struggling and spend your time there. That's where your biggest improvement will come from. Step 4. Use active methods. Answer practice questions, use flashcards, explain concepts out loud, teach the topic to someone else. Even better, pretend you're teaching it to a class. If you can't explain something simply, you probably don't understand it well enough. Step 5. Connect ideas together. Don't just memorize isolated facts. Ask yourself, how does this connect to something I already know? The more connections your brain creates, the easier that information becomes to retrieve later. And finally, step 6. Do a quick review before bed. You don't need another 3-hour study session. Just spend a few minutes recalling the most important things you learned that day. Then go to sleep. Sleep isn't wasted study time. Your brain uses sleep to help consolidate memories and learning. So, sacrificing sleep to squeeze in another few hours of passive learning can be a terrible trade-off. So, what's the real lesson we learned in this video? Study isn't a competition to see who can stay awake the longest. It's not about how many pages you can highlight or how beautiful your notes look or how many hours your study timer says you have completed. The real goal is simple. Learn more in less time and actually remember it. So, go back to the number you choose at the beginning, that rating from 1 to 10. Would you still give your study method the same score? If your answer is no, that's actually a good thing. Because recognizing that your method isn't working is the first step towards changing it. You don't necessarily need to study harder, you need to study smarter. And once you understand that, you might discover something surprising. You don't need more hours, you need a better strategy. Thanks for watching this video and I'll see you in the next one.